We're going to see how we can get data from Google Drive into our data cloud and perform data mapping on that. And before we do that, let's get familiarized with the terms we use. So here we have data source. The data source is the origin of the data. For in our example, it's going to be the Google Drive, Google Sheet. A data stream defines how the data is extracted. How often is it extracted from the source and what format? Think of it like a bridge between the data source and Salesforce. Data ingestion is nothing but a process of loading external data into Salesforce Data Cloud. Data lake objects are a temporary storage for raw unprocessed data inside data cloud. So all the raw data that comes in from the data source from our data stream will be saved into data lake object. Connecting fields of your raw data to a standard Salesforce data structure is what's called data mapping. And once we finish data mapping, we get a data model object, a standard object used by Salesforce to structure and unify customer data. The core DMOs are individual, contact point, email, engagement, sales, order. So to start with, we have this Google Sheet inside our Google Drive where we have employee information, employee ID, full name, email, role, department, and contact and company ID. So we're going to get this data into our data cloud. So let's get started. To start with, first thing first, we need to first go to our data cloud setup and go into feature manager, and then here we need to see if the connector is enabled. If it's not enabled, we need to enable this. So once the connector is enabled, then we go to other connectors. Once we're here, click new, look for Google Drive, give it a name, Google Drive. Here we're going to use an auth provider. In our auth provider, we'll use Google Drive Data Cloud auth provider. Authenticate. It's going to take us to a Google page where we can authenticate our user. Okay, so now I've entered all my Google information and now it's authenticated. Let's test the connection. There we go. It's a successful connection. Click save. Now we have a connector established with Google Drive. Let's move on to Data Cloud app. We go to data streams, create a new data stream. And here you will see an external data source showing up, Google Drive. You're going to click that. And here we need the Google Drive link of the Google Sheet. So we'll go back to our Google Sheet and get the Google Drive link. Paste that here. Next. Here we see we have a new data stream. On this step, what we need to select is the properties of the data stream. So what is the category of the data that's flowing in? In our case, we are trying to get employee profiles, employee information. The best category that fits employee details is a profile category. So the profile category represents an individual account or other profile. The data is used for segmentation and analytics. So basically, category helps us segment and unify data so that it can be used by our other systems like marketing cloud. So in our case, because we are loading in employee information, the best category that fits our needs is the profile category. So we're going to select that here, and then primary key is employee ID. If we don't need these are not required. So we'll see all of these columns are going to be. On this page, we have settings like upsert or full refresh, the refresh mode. So in our case, we're going to select upsert because this is the first time we're loading in any information. A full refresh will delete the existing data and put in new data. But in our case, we'll select upsert here. Here, we're going to select the frequency. The frequency basically defines how often we pull in the new data from our data source into data cloud. In our case, let's select the options we have here are hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. We're going to select hourly. What that means is, so every hour it's going to pull the data source and look for new data available to pull that into data cloud. And the last option here we have is refresh data stream immediately. So if you take this, the data will be start pulling in immediately from the data source. Now we have a data stream created and it's active. And so what we can do is let's do a refresh now. So that will just immediately get data from a data source. And then when we go to data lake object, we will see right here our data lake object is created. Then we can move on to a data model where we'll see a data model. So as I mentioned here, we see the data lake object is automatically created when we create the data stream. So data lake object is nothing but the raw data that is going to come in from the external source, which is in our case this sheet. So next, what we can do is now we need to map this data into standard objects in data cloud. For that, here we have this option called data mapping. We'll start the data mapping here. Here, select the objects. This can take a while sometimes. As we know, we are pulling in employee information from the Google Sheet. So the mapping needs to be done into individual object. Number one, it's going to be done into individual object, contact point, email, and account contact. Okay, we're going to start our mapping into these objects. So the objects, we're just going to go over the objects we selected: account contact, contact point, email, and individual object. These are the 4 objects that we're going to map these fields into. Start by mapping fields into individual object. All right, here we have individual ID. Yeah, we map the employee ID to the individual object's individual ID. And then we'll move to contact point email ID to our, again, primary key employee ID. And we'll map that email to email address, which is automatically done for us. And then we'll map our employee ID to the party ID here. Next, moving on, we have our contact point. So we're going to map our contact point ID with the employee ID to contact point ID. Party ID also with the employee ID as our party ID. Employee ID to account contact ID, and company ID to account, then individual ID to employee ID. And yeah, that's going to be our final mapping. Just to go over them again, all employee IDs is going to be mapped to party ID in contact point email, and individual ID, and account contact ID of the account contact object. After we do this mapping, just click on save. And here we go. We got a message saying successfully added map. That's all for the video, guys. Hope you liked it, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe.